Hello, we're back for more. The seasons are changing. Maybe the tide is turning. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about Texas and all of the other states that seem to be reversing, opening up, and rescinding their mask mandates. So far I can think of Texas, Mississippi, Iowa, Montana. I'm sure I'm missing a couple. North Dakota. My question is, what is actually going to change? So my observation last year was that there were still a few states that did not have statewide mask mandates. South Dakota being one of the most world famous for not really doing anything statewide. But Florida didn't have a mask mandate. Idaho, Georgia, there were a couple. And my observation from talking to people in those states was that they kind of had a de facto mandate. There were enough national chain businesses that had mask requirements for entry. There were a lot of national or international churches that had their own capacity limits. My church definitely fell into that category, and they had their own mask mandates too. So while you can look at those states and say, look, there are no statewide mandates, okay, but look at the way things are actually being done on a day-to-day basis. There may have been local county-wide mask mandates, as happened in Idaho. I have family in two different parts of Idaho. One had a mandate, the other didn't. So it was very locality dependent. Almost every school that I know of, if it was a public school district, they still required masks, they still required distancing. They had limits on extracurriculars, either whether they were being done at all or whether parents were allowed to attend. So I don't know of a place where there literally was nothing done and everything was just as it would have been had the world not completely lost sight of any big picture at all. So that was my observation last year, which meant I was pretty darn jaded, cynical about whatever might happen with a big state like Texas opening up, because they still have national chain stores. They still have, or businesses in general, not just stores. They had, that could include banks, it includes the optometrists, it includes all of the other businesses that people do that might be a chain somewhere or another. Most of them have a national mandate. And what has been happening to small businesses if they say, forget this, we're going to live normally? I'm wearing my cracked egg shirt. They were hammered on places like Yelp with reviews from people who were never going to come to Pittsburgh ever, let alone go to their restaurant. They just wanted to dogpile and say, look at these horrible people, and they should be shut down. So most businesses caved to pressure like that. And it is what it is. But most businesses, whether they were small or not, said, this is what customers want. Whether or not that's really true. I mean, all it takes is some really, really loud people making the right threats. And you're going to get hammered if you don't do what the loud bullies tell you to do. So what's going to change with the reversal of any mask mandates? So far, reports from Texas, not much has changed. I do hear tell of a school district or two that's way out in the middle of nowhere, and they said, okay, we're done with this. And like those businesses, they get hammered by people who will never live there, will never send their children to those schools, saying, you're going to be the reason that we will get stuck in all of this. You're going to be the reason that this virus comes roaring back. It's all going to be your fault. Never mind that the really big CDC study that came out that said, look, mandates work. It showed maybe a 1% improvement one way or another. And the intervention isn't the mask, it's the mandate. Because again, South Dakota could have put in a mandate, probably wouldn't have changed all that much. So, what is actually going to change? My prediction is nothing changes until there is a tipping point of pushback. Nothing's going to change until people say, we need church at full capacity with the ability to sing, with the ability to socialize. Because look, my church has been mostly over Zoom for the last year. One of the most valuable things that I think happens at church is when you get that 5 or 10 minutes in between things. 5 or 10 minutes, 1 week at a time, you build relationships. You have little side conversations going on in a Sunday school class. You have seeing someone across the room. You make eye contact. You say something later on. None of that is happening over Zoom. And you can't just have one big thing and say, this is how we're going to build our relationship. It's got to happen a little bit at a time, organically. You don't get organic relationships over the internet. If you're trying to build a relationship as a congregation, as a community of people, it doesn't happen over Zoom. And until churches push back on that, I said it last video, where are you? Where are you on all of this? Do you care more about liability than about the actual welfare of the actual people in your congregation? Speaking of things I'm jaded about, when liability became more important than people. So, all that to say, I see people being excited about, we're opening up, this state's opening up, Connecticut loosened their capacity limits, and that's a deep blue state in the Northeast, and this is all going to be great. Until it comes from the bottom up with actual pushback. Stop asking permission. The CDC does not grant you permission. The president doesn't grant you permission. And it doesn't take a big rally at a capitol somewhere. It doesn't take a massive protest somewhere. It's your everyday life. That's my plea as we're heading into spring. I will say my family will sample firsthand what's going on in Texas. That is our spring break plans in a couple of weeks. But I'm not hopeful. We'll go for the people, but not because we think it's going to be significantly better than it was the last time we were there last summer. So, open up, take it off, live as free people. That's the only thing that's going to end all of us. Have a good week. One last thing. See, one of the disadvantages of doing this while driving is that you can't exactly have notes. And if I forget something, it's got to come in some other way. Now, one of the things that I'm going to be very interested in going forward is how these different states handle such a big difference from one to the other. I've been wondering if we're going to have something along the lines of, oh, pardon the comparison, free states and slave states. As it is, it feels like this is the way Civil War is going to turn out. You have states that are running things so differently than their neighbors or than another region of the country. How fractured are we going to be as a country? So I've spent most of my life in either California or New York. I had a couple of years in Utah, a couple of years in Oregon. Obviously, we're working on a year in Pennsylvania here, but most of my life was either California or New York. They feel like they're behind enemy lines to me right now. Because what would happen if I went back there? You don't have the same quality of life there that you do in another region of the country. Your businesses are much more threatened there than they are somewhere else. Your schools are much more threatened. Your very livelihood, the way you conduct your daily life is so much more threatened on the freedom front than it is in even neighboring Pennsylvania. Big difference between New York and Pennsylvania. So what is it going to turn out as we go forward? I've made the scriptural comparison. The last shall be first and the first shall be last. It's probably reversed in the scriptures. Anyway, all of these states that are opening up now, they were among the last to close down last year. The Northeast and California are going to be some of the last to open back up. They're going to hold on to it longest. And as far as the people are concerned, as far as the citizens of any of those states are concerned, we're not a free country anymore. If we ever were, maybe that was always an illusion, but that you can do things in one state that you cannot do in another. We're very, very fractured as a country, and I worry about that going forward. Because I think that is going to be something that some states hold on to kind of as a point of pride. No, we're not like those places. We're already seeing that. New York puffs itself up because we're not like Florida. Well, how's that working for you? Well, I'm interested to know how other people in other parts of the country are doing. How do you think this is going to go forward? How do you think we can work together as a country? Or if we can't, how do you think we're going to fracture? I'm very interested to see how it all comes out.